Alive and Well STL is a presentation of the St. Louis Regional Health Commission with the first decade review of health status report to build a healthier St. Louis, and RareGem Productions. Power up with the positive. Learn more at OneRareGem.com. That's OneRaregem.com.
Support for Alive and Well STL comes from Beyond Housing, helps entire communities become better places to live. Learn more at beyondhousing.org.
The Regional Health Commission works in partnership with regional health sector advocates and stakeholders to improve healthcare access, reduce health disparities, and improve health outcomes for the uninsured and the underinsured in St. Louis City and County.
Alive and Well STL with Bethany Johnson-Javois, CEO of the St. Louis Integrated Health Network.
As we talk and think about what it means for our community to be alive and well, I am so pleased to be speaking with Pat McGonigle, anchor for KSDK Channel 5, and Sergeant Sally Panzer from the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. Mr. McGonigle and Sergeant Panzer were brought together just last month at the McAtee Awards, of which Mr. McGonigle was the host. Mr. McGonigle has seen firsthand the difference a well-trained, compassionate officer can have in the life of a family member of someone living with mental illness. Sergeant Panzer clearly has a proven track record of success as an officer of helping people living with mental illness to get connected to the care they need. Through your work as well as your life experiences, you have a unique perspective on what our region needs to become alive and well.
We'll be right back. What does it mean to you to be alive and well in St. Louis? We want to hear your story. Tell us what it means to you personally, what you need to achieve it, how our program may have helped, or even some of your best recommendations for the rest of us. You can share it on the message box at 314-333-8369. You can send an email to info@OneRareGem.com. You can even post it on Facebook at ONERGP or on the Hallelujah 1600 page as well. We'll share your message with our community to help make it possible for everyone to thrive. It's great to be alive. Be alive and well, STL. 10 a.m. Mondays on Hallelujah 1600. RareGem Productions proudly presenting the positive. Alive and well, STL.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Jade Harrell, producer of Alive and Well, STL. Today we are joined in the studio by Pat McGonigle, anchor for KSDK Channel 5, and Sergeant Sally Panzer from the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. As we talk and think about what it means for our community to be alive and well, I am so pleased to be speaking with you both. Through your work as well as your life experiences, you have a unique perspective on what our region needs to become alive and well. Mr. McGonigle and Sergeant Panzer were brought together just last month at the McAtee Awards, of which Mr. McGonigle was the host. These awards, given by Mental Health America of Eastern Missouri, honor law enforcement officers whose compassion and dedication make a significant difference in the lives of persons living with mental illness. Sergeant Panzer was honored twice this year for two separate situations with individuals experiencing a mental health crisis, both of which had positive outcomes. She clearly has a proven track record of success as an officer of helping people living with mental illness to get connected to the care they need to become well. So as host for the second year of the Mental Health America McAtee Awards, Mr. McGonigle has become a champion for officers who help facilitate positive outcomes for families and individuals experiencing a mental health crisis. Mr. McGonigle has seen firsthand the difference a well-trained, compassionate officer can have in the life of a family member of someone living with mental illness. Welcome, both of you. We are pleased that both of you are able to join us. Our listeners may be surprised to hear a police officer and a television news anchor talking about mental illness. So to start, tell us how you became involved in this project.
Yeah, ironically, it was just by accident. I was filling in last year. This is the second year I was honored to be part of the McAtee Awards. I filled in for Sarah Daly 2 years ago, my first year, because she couldn't make it. And when I learned more about what the event was, a ceremony where police are recognized for being humane and compassionate with people who have mental illness, I immediately said, oh my God, I know all about that because my mom has bipolar depression. She's manic depressive. So I grew up around that. And heartbreaking thing because everyone thinks their mom is an angel and a saint, and my mom is. But there were times when she would, for a few months, be way, way, way high, and you couldn't talk to her, and she couldn't sleep, and she had grandiose thoughts, and she would zip away to the islands and run up debt on my dad's credit cards, and we didn't know where she was. Then she'd come home for, 6 months, and she couldn't get out of bed, and the phone made her cry. And I always knew, even as a kid, maybe this is divine intervention, I don't know, but I always knew that it was just a sickness. Like I never thought my mom's being a jerk, or my mom's on a bender, my mom's being selfish, or my mom's being lazy, she won't get out of bed. So I always kind of knew from a young age that severe mental illness was an illness. It wasn't just, come on, stop being a jerk, snap out of it. So I was just thrilled. I was just so thrilled to be in a venue, because I said this 2 years in a row. I know my mom's not going to hear this. She's still alive, but there have been police in my house when I grew up. And that's not a great thing to brag about. But when you're in a family sometimes and somebody's very ill, when the police come, they're there because somebody's got to put a stop to, like, something has to end. And so Sergeant Panzer, I just stand in awe of the work that she does and that all police officers do. By the way, just an aside, the big story in McKinney, Texas, where the police were in trouble because of the pool party that got out of control. And I heard on the news last night that the officer, not dismissing his actions, but the one who's in hot water for what he did, they said he had 2 straight suicide calls that he was on before he got the call to go to break up this pool party. Not dismissing what he did, but you can imagine the toll that he must have been under, right?
I can only assume and speculate based upon, I wasn't there, but his frame of mind was probably he was under a lot of duress and stress at that particular time.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Jade, I probably jumped ahead there. You probably want to introduce Sergeant.
No, please, listen. This is a safe place for that.
Yeah. No, please. So Sergeant Panzer.
The purpose of this movement, the purpose of this project is that. So please feel free. Do not put any hindrances on what you would say from your heart.
No, I do. From a news person and a human being, I couldn't do what you do. I stand in awe of what you do. There are so many volatile situations in St. Louis and everywhere when all else has failed and there's a disturbed, sick person. Now you have to go in and fix it. I wouldn't know how to start, but you do.
Sometimes you just literally start at the beginning and just start talking, and it just kind of works out from there, actually. Mm-hmm. So sometimes that's just the thing you can do.
What do you mean the beginning, Sergeant Panzer?
The beginning is just our main goal of CIT is obviously to get voluntary compliance. And so we're trained to go in and, build rapport and active listening skills and all of that. And that's what it is. It's a lot of times it's not just listening to the words, it's hearing the meaning of the words and what the person is meaning. You don't have to agree with them. It's not like that. They want to be heard, and everyone has a story, so listen to their story. And that's kind of what it's about. And then hopefully by listening to them and building that rapport, we can bring them down to a calmer mental state. And when a person's in a calmer mental state, then they will be able to think a little bit more rationally and be more compliant.
With Alive and Well, one of the key questions that we're to consider is when we approach a situation or a person in crises or otherwise, instead of what's wrong with you, we are to ask what happened to you or what may be at the heart of what's troubling you. I heard you say that, Pat, with your mom, that at no point you ever felt that she was just mean or off, that you knew something was behind it. So it wasn't about what's wrong with you. That was a natural question for you. And I hear also, too, with you, Sergeant, that in your work, and you mentioned CIT. What is that acronym?
The CIT stands for Crisis Intervention Team.
Okay. That with CIT, that you approach a situation similarly. Can you talk about how that made a difference on how you responded to your mom and then in turn responded as a person that is in the life and impacted by someone with mental illness?
I think the one thing, it's sort of a sick source of pride that I have. I'm the youngest of 5 in my family growing up. And I was always the first one to notice when my mom was starting to get manic, starting to get a little up. So, for instance, she wasn't a smoker. She isn't a smoker, but she would smoke occasionally. And that was usually when she was starting to get manic. I'd come home from school and she would smoke Benson and Hedges. And I'd say, that's weird. And she'd say, I know, I'm not smoking again. And she had all these rationalizations. And then she'd start ordering Chinese food a lot. And then we had a fireplace that we never used. And all of a sudden there's always a fire every night. And then booze. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is it made me, either because of self-preservation or whatever, I don't know, I was always very tuned in to these subtle changes. And so I kind of feel as though I've been a sensitive person my whole life, probably too sensitive, and I am famous for misreading things, but I'm always, I guess I'm overly sensitive. And I guess they say this about, children of, families with trouble, that you're, always looking to mediate and what's the word I'm trying to look for? Try to prevent from trouble, diffuse drama, somebody who like not confrontational. Like I don't want there to be shouting and fireworks.
You're a peacemaker.
Yeah, like I just as soon everybody calm down.
Yeah, you're a peacemaker.
Yeah. So I suppose that's kind of how it shaped me for good or for bad, But,
so then you knew to be aware of and look for indicators and ways to kind of engage with her then.
Yeah. And like I said, and by the way, and I'm sure you know this, and chemical addiction is something that's in my family as well. And I only say that because with my mom and with people who struggle with substances, I have learned, like, once the train has left the station, there's no talking to them, really. I mean, I don't mean to say that. I mean, because that's what you do. But
it's difficult.
Yeah.
It's very difficult.
Yeah. And so, that's, something that, I guess maybe that's why I'm so amazed by what you do. Because, don't they say, Sally, Sergeant Panzer, that, when somebody's having an episode or somebody's high on whatever or drunk, like, that's like the worst time to confront them about their drug use or whatever it is they're doing?
Yeah, it's not about placing blame or this is the root and cause of your problems. It's just listening to where they are right then and how they're feeling. If you start to place blame like, well, you're this way because you've been drinking, let's say, just throwing that out there as a potential cause, all that's doing is now you're accusing. And typically when someone starts getting accused, particularly like that, like, well, this is why you're doing it, you've been drinking, and they're going to immediately get defensive and walls go up and then you can't talk to them.
Right.
And then you have more walls to break down in order to be able to start talking to them. So the last thing you really want to do is walk into a situation like that and immediately just accuse someone of, well, you're just crazy, or you've been drinking, or, you've been doing drugs, whatever the situation. But the moment you start becoming accusatory, that's when you're going to start, creating a lot of walls and a lot of distance to help that person.
Mm-hmm. Mr. McGonigle, you've shared your story.
Please call me Pat.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I do enjoy that. Yeah. Pat, you've shared your story about having law enforcement respond to calls in your home growing up. Can you reflect on the impact that the officers made when interacting with your family member living with a mental illness?
Yeah, it was a small town in Massachusetts, and so I always felt that they're very humane, and it was unfortunate to have a law enforcement official in our home. I mean, no offense, but it was never oh my God, like this person's going to arrest everybody or this is going to be terrible. It was always just very even-handed. And I'm trying to remember the 2 or 3 times it happened. I think usually what happened is some members of the family would go to a different place for the night. Like nobody ever ended up in handcuffs, but the drama ended and it was sort of like, police, judge, and jury on the scene. It was not like we're going to lock you up, because I think the officers knew they dealt with just amazing patience and snap decision-making on the scene. So, and that's usually how it ended. Somebody went away and spent a night or a week somewhere else, and we started over again. And that was great. An outside person wearing a badge can make that call. The people who were in our house prior to that weren't in a position to make that call.
Sure. Sure. Well, Sergeant Panzer, how do we as a community support the ability of law enforcement to respond effectively to people with mental illness?
I think the biggest thing there would be to have the understanding that while we're responding to a scene and we're on a scene, we have a dual role. And the first role is everyone's safety, public safety, our safety, and that person's safety who's in crisis. So that's part of our role, is the safety factor. And the other part of that role in maintaining what we do is we're also there to help that person. So the community support and understanding that's kind of, we have a lot going on right then. And so if it's a lot of people sometimes try to interject things and like that. And if we're asking you to please, allow us to step back and do our jobs so we can talk to this person, that's very beneficial. Because like I said, there's a lot going on sometimes on cases like this, and all the bystanders doesn't always help. Sure. So just kind of give us a little bit of space so that we can work one-on-one with that person without interference. It makes it a lot easier on us and safer for everybody. Sure. That's there.
That's understandable. Is there something you can offer the bystanders that may have an emotional connection or idea of how they might help or understand the situation? How do they kind of function within that space of feeling helpless or hopeless when somebody needs to come and intervene? What's something you could offer them to utilize to give you that space?
I would say that, there's always going to be a couple of us there. And if you can, like as we're walking up and approaching, the person who's in crisis, is if you could say, sir or ma'am, can I speak with you just for a moment? That's a friend of mine. And let me talk to you about them. Let me tell you what's going on with them. That's a great help. We love that. It just also depends on what's going on with that person in crises, if they're acting out and what have you. So if they're acting out, we need to take care of that first. But after that, and everything's quieted down, get a hold of us and say, hey, this is what's going on. This is their past history. I know them. This is what's a trigger. This is what triggered this behavior. And that gives us a great insight and lead into go and talking to that person more.
Sure. That communication can help not only the situation, but everyone else involved.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
So, Pat, having a family member living with a mental illness can be difficult without a support system in place. What advice can you offer families who may be going through this difficult time?
Oh, man. It's so hard. I think you test the bonds you have in your family when you go through stuff like this. To be honest with you, when we went through this, the problem that we had over and over again, and I know my mom's not going to hear this because she's in another state, but I'm going to be just forthcoming. I don't know if the laws have changed in Missouri and Massachusetts between now and then, but what always seemed to be the problem with our situation was that when my mom would be very, very manic, she didn't think she needed help. She didn't want to go to the hospital. She didn't want to check into a psych unit. And
that's normal.
And is that still the way it is? Like, you can't commit someone without their consent. Is that the right language?
There is certain standards within each state that are prerequisites that must be met prior to involuntary commitment.
Yeah, that's it.
They can commit themselves. There's always voluntary commitment. But as far as involuntary commitment goes, there are just certain standards that person must meet before law enforcement or even a mental health professional can actually force them to go into treatment.
Yeah, because it's so, our system is set up to where we have liberty and we have kind of the benefit of the doubt from being jailed or put away for no reason. So, but the problem with that is sometimes you have somebody who's, flying on cloud nine and maybe a danger to themselves and others and probably should be in a different environment, but they don't want to go, and you can't strong arm them into that. So I guess the only really useful or helpful thing I could say is to just really stick together with the rest of your family and just know that you're all in it together.
Yeah. How did you all pull through?
Oh, boy. It wasn't easy. I won't lie to you. It was hard, and some people dealt with it better than others. Some people retreated. But what's weird? Here again, I'm going to be honest with you. This is going to sound so dark and twisted, and I don't think it's a good answer or a healthy answer, but we laughed. We used humor. We would just kind of not make a joke of it, but when some weird thing happened and then when it was over with, we'd kind of laugh about it. And even now when we kind of talk about it as adults, we'll still laugh about it. I don't know if we're just kind of laughing through our tears or if it's just the way we decided.
It's just a coping mechanism.
Yeah, I guess so.
Is what that is, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Cops in general, we do that too, and people say you guys are kind of weird, because we'll laugh at at things. You'd be like, look at us and cock your head a little bit. But for us, it's also a coping mechanism from the daily things that we see as well, and we see a lot of things. So that's a fine coping mechanism. Laughter is always a good thing.
Yeah.
How are you coping today? How have you healed?
Yeah, I guess I'm sure there's some psychological scars that I probably don't readily know or could speak of. But I guess, to be honest, my big fear, I have 5 daughters, I have girls. So I guess my big fear really is, if it's in the bloodlines, if somehow I passed it along. And, oh, God, it would just break my heart if any of my girls had to deal with being bipolar, my God. And I just hope and pray that's not the case. But again, I guess the one thing I've done is just to try to be really understanding of, and my poor dad, he's not with us anymore. He dealt with some depression in his life, not like my mom, but when towards the end he had dementia and everything just kind of went to pot. It was this weird tailspin that I'm told is common of dementia with depression, and then he's depressed because he, and it's just this horrible thing. And my poor dad was, it was a tough go there towards the end, and I guess the only thing you can do is just so you find out how strong your bonds are with your family at times like that.
Sure. Sergeant Panzer, what advice can you share with our listeners who may find themselves in a situation with a family member in crisis and when the police become involved?
Well, there's a few things. The one thing is when you're on the phone, when you call 911 because you need to call us, and you're talking to the evaluator, make sure you request a CIT officer. That's very, very important. If you know that your family member is in a mental health crisis, ask for a CIT officer. And they know what they are. They're trained to know that. And they'll ask you a few more questions because that's information that we need to know. And even though it can be kind of hairy when you're calling us because there's stuff going on at the house, it's really also very important to answer those questions because that's really good information for us, when we're on our way to the call, as well as leave your callback number because a lot of times we try to call back when we can to talk to you beforehand to get more information even before we get there. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't, but that's very helpful to us. So, request a CIT officer when you're on the phone with evaluators and then give us as much information as you can, when we get there and give it to the evaluator. And that really helps tremendously.
Mm-hmm. So we're so thankful for you to join us today and bring this information to our listeners. And as we wrap up, is there anything that you want to emphasize or say to our listeners, Pat?
Yeah, I guess just kind of what I've been saying. I mean, if you have someone in your life who suffers from any kind of a mental illness, please try to recognize that they have an illness and that they need help. Their behaviors may offend you and you may think that they're acting like big selfish jerks, but please just try to see the larger picture and try to get them some help. They can come back. I've seen it myself, and just try to get them help and try to proceed with a big heart.
Yeah. I would also say, when police have to come into your home regarding a mental health crisis, we can also provide support for them as far as giving them information for support groups and who to reach out to for families and siblings who have people in their family that are in a mental health crisis or have a mental health illness. And that's really important, that support group. So, use that. It's extremely important. It can be very beneficial in a lot of different ways. So it's a powerful tool.
Thank you both very much for joining us. And the good news is that treatment works. There are medications, there's therapy, and other treatments that help people recover from mental illness. Recovery is possible. So thank you, everyone, for joining us for another episode of Alive and Well STL. We look forward to speaking with you next week. For more information about Alive and Well STL, follow us on Twitter at Alive and Well STL or visit us online at aliveandwellstl.com. We'll be back next week. Thanks for listening.
Alive and Well STL. Thank you for joining us today. For resources available, go to aliveandwellstl.com. If you have more questions about the program, need help, or want to connect, please call the message box at 314-333-8369. The Regional Health Commission with Chief Executive Officer Robert Friend Jr. committed to providing a detailed review of change over the past decade in 14 leading health indicators for the city and county of St. Louis. The first decade review of health status report, an update to building a healthier St. Louis. Discover the narrative, the data, and celebrate the progress already made to improve healthcare access and reduce health disparities in our region. Learn more at stlrhc.org. Alive and Well STL is another positive production of RareGem Productions. Thanks for listening.